Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I am your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is J.G. Fox, who is an artist in London and is connected, if not a contributor, to Unheard, which is not only a web publication, but apparently an in-person salon in the beating heart of London. In this conversation, Jay and I talk about the political landscape and the artistic landscape and where those two intersect. I find him to be a deep thinker as well as an exceptional artist. And if you have a chance, definitely find the largest computer screen that you can and click the link to his work, which is down there in the description. The rest is for you to listen to and not for me to explain. So without further ado, here is J.G. Fox.
Okay, cool. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Can you hear me all right? Is everything okay?
Yeah, I hear you great. You're ensconced by some nudists.
That's right. Yeah, it's Adam and Eve.
Yeah, poor folk.
Yeah.
Do you have any relation to them?
Yeah, I think they're a distant ancestor. I made this out of plasticine. You know, I think you have a different word for it in the US. Like it's like a children's modeling clay, like bright colored, like Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, really? Like
what do you
clay
call that
almost
stuff?
then?
Yeah.
Female, maybe? I don't know. Plasticine?
I don't know.
So
yeah,
you did
but
it all
over
like
here,
mushing with your hands or like with a
you just and mixing the colors like that. You know, like just red and yellow and blue. It took
wow.
ages. I did it through lockdown.
Oh, so there's only three. There's only three colors. Or
I think I had 6 or something like that.
oh wow, wow.
But the mixing took so long. You can see it on my website properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it well, I guess I'm not in person right now, but I like
yeah.
the angle.
Yeah, it looks really nice in person.
Texture. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get the light shining off it.
How big is it?
I don't know really. That's the sides of it. They're the edges. So
right.
Yeah, human scale.
That's big.
You just got back from GenSpect.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I got back from a lot of different things. That's why my camera's all not set up.
All right.
I'm still kind of like, yeah, I don't know where I am right now. I've been traveling so much in the last couple months.
Are you home now or are you still traveling?
I think this is home. I'm going to call it home, but it doesn't feel like home now. You know how it is.
Yeah. How long were you on the road?
Well, the last 4 months, I've been just traveling, California, New York,
wow.
DC, Hawaii, Denver. I think I'm missing one other place that I went.
That is a long time.
Yeah.
What brought that on?
Well, there's a lot of different activities going on. Some of it has to do with the gender issue.
Yeah.
The one event that my wife was working with is SAGM, which is Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, which is a conference with medical professionals talking about the evidence around, specifically about childhood body modification for the sake of gender identity or ideology, take your pick.
Right.
And then there's GenSpect, which is kind of the same thing but different because GenSpect has a broader umbrella that they're more inclusive of people who are not just professionals but mothers, detransitioners, trans widows, evolutionary biologists, cultural critics.
I know a little about GenSpect because I watch Stella's podcast sometime. She seems great.
With Sasha.
Yeah. Every once in a while I catch it. Yeah, she seems like a really nice lady.
They're doing wonderful work. Stella's great. Stella's wonderful. Why
do you think you got interested in that topic specifically? I was thinking about it earlier because people were asking me who you were, and I was saying, well, like what kind of podcast do you have? And I was saying, well, it covers a load of things like cultural wars and stuff, and then there's a lot of gender things as well. And I was thinking why those things end up getting linked. What do you think? What do you tell people?
Well, I have to. So how did you get into art? I'll answer your question.
I don't know. I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Maybe I should hit it back like a tennis ball. Well,
there's
no,
an
like
artistic temperament, right?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
I've always been doing art, really.
Yeah. And
It's
but
hard to know where
what's
to start.
like there's a reason why you do it, or like there's a temperament, right? Or would you agree with
Yeah,
that? There's a kind of an artistic temperament.
yeah,
And for me, one of the aspects of that is a compulsion to create, like a compulsion to produce, like a compulsion. I have to create something. I have to create something.
sure, yeah,
And then there's also a compulsion to be unique, or unique's not quite the word, but not just to produce, but to produce something new, or to produce a variation on something, or to
yeah, yeah,
engage creatively
yeah,
with the material. So that, and over the course of my life, that takes on different kind of like either more egocentric, or what's the opposite of egocentric, egotistonic or something like that. I
right.
don't know.
I'll take your word for it.
Kind of, is it about me, or is it about something else? Anyway,
Right.
so with regard to creating something such as content, which is what we call what we're creating right now, we're creating content.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
There's a need to constantly produce content. ABC, always be
Yeah.
contenting.
Right.
But then you also want content that's interesting, content that's valuable. So content basically that grabs attention, that keeps attention, and then once the audience engages their attention with it, because it's interesting, they invest their interest into it, then they get a return on their interest. They get a return on their investment. So somehow valuable. And so when I was in the so-called anti-woke movement, or the anti-SJW movement, or the, I don't know, a cultural, critical of social justice movement, which is where I began with regard to trying to understand what happened at the Evergreen State College, and then trying to understand what's happening in our culture with, with our media and all this kind of really weird agitation for revolution stuff that was going on, and still is going on. If you can believe it, they haven't run out of revolution, because the revolution never runs out. There's different topics that one can get invested in, and race as a topic, it has a very short shelf life for me. One, because it just doesn't matter to me that much. Like race just isn't, I mean, I know it, racism and race has an effect, or has a salience culturally, but the culture war around it doesn't seem like it's ever going to end, because it's a perpetual tribal signifier, and there's a lot of vested interest into keeping racism going on. Like the people the most racist people right now want to preserve racism in the name of ending racism. Right. And it's just so, like, there's no real meaning to that. Right next door to that, or adjacent to that, if you go and you see this social justice stuff is trying to advance the revolution on all these different fronts. One being race. It used to be class, but class isn't so salient anymore. It's more about race. And
really
then there's this other stuff called gender. And gender has to do with men and women and the categories that they inhabit culturally. And there is a whole lot of salience there for me, because men and women, just like the picture behind you, they come together and they create this thing called humanity, and they create this thing called culture, and they create this thing called families, and they create these things called babies, and they create these things called relationships, and then men get together and they create this thing called patriarchy, which is awesome, and women get together and they create this thing called matriarchy, which is also awesome. And there's all this tension, and the tension is always dynamic, and it's very personal to me, because it's personal to everybody. Everybody has a very deep relationship with their own sex and with their gender, which it would be their way of interacting with the culture as a sexed individual, as a man or as a woman. So that's the short answer.
Wouldn't you say that you're more, because if it was just that, wouldn't you be interested in just feminism and power plays between men and women? But you're interested in specifically transgenderism, which is isn't it more to do with, it's a very specific claim to say you're in the wrong body. And you seem to be more interested in that specifically than the idea of the dynamic between men and women as groups, because that's I'm not sure how that fits in with. It's definitely linked to the culture war and what happened at Evergreen in a wider picture.
Yeah,
but I just wonder how you would say it fit in. Well, like I don't know. Firstly, would you agree with that? That's more specifically what you're interested
in transgenderism.
Yeah, in the claim that you can be in the wrong body.
Well, I mean, if you look at my series on sex, gender, and transition, very little of it is about actually transition. It's more about what this topic is bringing out in other people and what this topic is causing other people to state claims in. There's so much more. The claim that you can be born in the wrong body is just one specific vector of opening up the question, what is it to be in a body? What is it to be a man? What is it to be a woman? So it's a pretext. And I have a playlist called Women.
Right.
And it's just 240 or so hours of me just listening to women. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? So the transgenderism thing is just, I guess, one way in which the algorithm makes my content available to people, but it's really not.
That's probably right. Yeah.
Not terribly important to me because it's not true. There's nothing true there. I mean, there is truth in, I guess some would say, being highly gender dysphoric. There's personal truth there. There's truth in the ability for science and technology to modify human beings to appear in certain ways. So that there's factual truth there, but there's no truth in being born in the wrong body. Yeah.
Have you read Mary Harrington's new book?
Feminism Against Progress.
That's right.
Yeah. She's great. Do you know her? Do you get to hang out?
I haven't met her yet. But,
really?
No. Yeah, I know. Oh. I want to see her around. I think she's great. I think she's the best writer at Unheard. But because she puts forward a case of. See, that's more what I was getting. I thought you would be more interested. I didn't know that you were more specifically interested in sex. I thought it was that sort of what did she call it, the cyborg side of things.
The cyborg is modification on the base human being, so I'm interested in the base human being.
Right. Yeah,
I've been doing that topic for 5 years, and there's still more to think about and to discuss.
Yeah,
and it's not just the trans stuff is just one. That's what calls attention to this deeper cultural issue. What is a man? What is a woman? Why are human beings split into man and woman? Why do men and women tend to be different? And how can we modify society intentionally, or can we modify society intentionally to help harmonize the sexes more? And what is this war? What is this battle of the sexes? And how did it result in this battle over gender?
Yeah.
And what's a woman?
Yeah.
And what am I supposed to do with being a man? Do you think about that? Yeah. I mean, it's literally right behind you. Like there's this very powerful, symbolic relationship that's thousands of years old, and specifically as an art form is foundational to Western art. It's like this relationship between male and female, and there's something tricky right between them. There's this fruit that has something to do with life. There's this fruit that has something to do with good and bad. And then there's this really snaky little devil that's intertwining and screwing with us constantly. Yeah. Right between us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It is a fascinating subject. Yeah.
What do you think about it?
About what, men and women?
About gender, about the entire subset of culture that's based around male and female, whether it's rights or expression,
I think,
or power.
I'm really convinced by the first part of Mary Harrington's argument that feminism, especially over the 20th century, was a result of advances in technology, and then
technology, and also the Enlightenment. This idea of the individual being the basic building block of humanity, and how women specifically interact with the idea of the individual rational agent.
Yeah, but then doesn't she argue that it's technology that allowed women to be freer agents and therefore sort of fill that role?
I think, didn't technology enable all of us? It enabled all of us. So Mary Harrington's, a great deal of Mary Harrington's, not her ideas or her argument, but the basis of how she's crafting it is based on Erica Bacchiocchi's, I don't think I have it here, history of the feminist movement. And so there's an ideological aspect to this, but there's a technological and an ideological aspect of this, and they're intertwined. The Enlightenment was a certain relationship to the world that enabled technology to rapidly increase its efficacy and its intrusion into what it means to be man. So the family unit had been based in a very local kind of life, right? So the man wasn't that far from home. The man was working in the field, the woman was working in the field, and then there was there was this kind of gendered split in the activities, and then children were also working too. But once the man gets shipped off to this company over here, right, and he leaves the home, the woman's left with the home, and it's no longer as integrated. But then the woman in the home starts to have the washing machine, starts to have like the vacuum, right, and starts to get which frees her time up from these really arduous kind of activities, right? And so where does that time go? And the man is also broken from the family too. And then there's this whole, I can't really get into, I can't really remember it all, but there's this whole idea of property and how law or how society delegated property between man and woman was kind of the property of the man. And in our point of view, that seems like he owns her, but it was just the way that the state conceived of this primary unit, which was one whole. A man and a woman came together and were one thing. It was the family. And so the man was the agent that, was responsible for that family, and the woman was a part of that family. Then however they delegated their ownership within the family is one thing, but however the state interacted with it was through another thing. And then you have the evolution of property rights being granted to women, the suffrage being granted not only to women, but to non-landed men, right? So you have like this, feminism is one aspect of this whole kind of societal development that's in the shadow of the Enlightenment, or sparked from these ideas that are nested in the Enlightenment.
I like the idea that, like as you explained there, when it was more just these family units of cottages with little cottage industries, in a sort of pre-modern era, that there was something like, I don't know if you call it like equality, but there was more equality,
tighter integration. There was tighter integration. So the balance of it was, I'm sure, like the balance shook out. And if you listen to a lot of specifically UK radical feminists, they really concentrate heavily on women's rights. And so they're really concentrating on how women were abused, or much more easily abused. And they bring up really good instances. I think in Dublin, there were actually signs telling you not to beat your wife, kind of like in New Orleans, there's signs telling you not to murder other people, so there's there's certain aspects of it where women did get the shorter end of the stick. It's not the full picture though.
But it was more like both had horrible lives, It was,
compared to what? Compared to us?
Compared to modern day, but like, so
us who
the
are
men
popping like SSRIs and feeling completely alienated from the world.
But
from
I mean,
in
terms of what you'd think of as oppression, like the men would be going out and working really difficult jobs, in coal mines, and then the women would be at home doing, very difficult things as well. And there was, I don't know, because like looking at it like that, it makes it harder to go with that sort of that radical feminist Marxist type conflict theory view that the whole of history is just men sort of oppressing women as a class. But it can't have been like that primarily, because it must have been more like, that you form a family unit and you have respect for each other and you try and get through things. You can see that in literature from medieval times and Renaissance times. It's not just an oppressive class oppressing another. There's a balance there.
Yeah.
And I think Harrington argues that that balance got more out of whack as industrialization happened. Like you said, the men go away from the home. Yeah. And it sort of makes things easier for men, but women who have to look after children don't get those advancements until maybe a century later, and then start to catch up. But
yeah, I mean, and that's assuming that there's only one archetype of how those families went through.
Sure,
life,
yeah.
Because I mean, there's plenty of people who, you think of religious people and how they harmonize the duties between the man and the woman, and there's in America, and I'm sure in in your fair country of Avalon, that the conservative people made it work, and they had faith, love, charity, they got them through. But you know what? Every culture is different, and I know the sexism, exists, or has existed, but to what degree is that the defining characteristic of society? And once we say that is the defining characteristic of our society, ergo radical feminist critique of the patriarchy, how does that not just lead to men emasculating themselves because man is evil, turning into women, and then women thinking man is good, or man is the good, or man is the standard of good, and becoming more and more masculine? It does get all out of whack, and that's how we get to not just transgenderism, but just gender bendery, more broadly speaking.
Yeah, I've seen that in... that's how it is in art criticism. You have, just ideas like the male gaze and things. Everything's got to be seen as if, through that conflict theory lens, that everything is, one class oppressing another for history.
Yeah.
Like you had, the book Ways of Seeing by John Berger?
No, sounds good.
There was, back in the, I think, late 60s in the UK, you started to get color televisions more readily available. And so most houses started to have a color TV. And the BBC started they wanted to fund a program that would look really good on color televisions. And so they commissioned this huge documentary series called Civilization by Kenneth Clark. I think it was a big hit over in America as well in the sort of 60s, 70s. And, and it was showing the story of human civilization from, from caveman times to today, and especially through art and, artifacts and things. And it was a way of showing off color TV because you could show the paintings and, the artifacts in museums and things. Yeah. And so, and it was a really, really big success because they were pushing it so hard. It was this big flagship program. And it was, I think it's still regarded as a really pivotal documentary. It set the standard for how TV documentaries are made and things. Yeah. And so it was a really big deal. But because it was the late 60s, in academia, you had this postmodern movement. And the postmodern sort of art professors, they didn't like the program because it paints a grand narrative of human history, And so then there was a response to that. Like a couple of years later, they commissioned another program by a man named John Berger, who was an art critic. And he gave a sort of counter to Civilization. It was called Ways of Seeing. And he wrote a book from it. I think that is where the term the male gaze comes from, or at least the gaze. And then it was adapted from that to the male gaze. But it was a really, really influential show, like Civilization, because, and it's really good. Like, I've seen it on YouTube. You can watch it. And it's...
how do you spell John's last name? Berger or Berger?
Berger. I think it's Berger, but I'm not sure. John Berger.
Berger.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And Yeah, but he put forward that sort of critical theory way of looking at art, and I think it was the first time that came out to a wide audience, on out of the universities and onto TV, and people found it really interesting. So he would look at pictures like the civilization program would just look at, they would take a painting and then they would explain how this tells you about this time in human history, what people were doing, what people were thinking. And it's a progressive thing, and then a century later, it advanced to this and this and this. And that's obviously not the critical theory way of seeing it. They don't like the idea of this grand narrative, this one story that runs through human civilization. The idea was the only narrative is just is enforced by power. So as whoever's in power, they can, yeah, huh?
That's a narrative.
Yeah, yeah. But he would analyze paintings like the show was just him standing in front of a sort of green screen, and then they would show pictures on the screen. He would just talk to the camera and give a sort of lecture. But they're really engaging because they were new ideas, And so he would show something like a picture of a nude, and instead of and so the way you'd analyze it is, what does this tell you about the time it was painted? How were women treated? What was the person, the painter? What does it tell you about them? What does it tell you about the society and the culture around the painting? Or a better example would be, he looks at I remember one specifically where there's a pastoral scene with two rich Dutch landowners, I think, dressed up in their Sunday best, like a dual portrait. And in the background, you've got their estate and the house and things, that like from maybe the 1700s, someone's commissioned this couple. And he's looking at that. And then you investigate, what does this tell you about money? What does it tell you about, the way that society was structured, how capitalist it is? What about the people who aren't in the painting? What about the people that worked on the plantations that these people must have owned and the land? And it's a way of, criticizing the culture through the artwork.
Yeah.
And it was very influential. And I think that's still the dominant way to look at paintings in, if you go to museums and things.
That's not looking at paintings, though.
No.
That's thinking.
No.
That's thinking about paintings.
Yeah. But even then, if you go around, I would say if you go around the big museums in London, that's how most of the critique will come across still. It will be used as the paintings are a way to understand the power structures that were at play at the time the artwork was made. Yeah. And you look at what isn't there and what who's excluded. And
as an artist, how does that mindset influence you when you're creating something to be looked at?
Well, it's totally wrong, I think. I think that it's complicated because it relies on a postmodern philosophy that says that we can't have any shared language. Because the alternative to that is that when you look at a picture of the Madonna and Christ, that's a shared cultural image that has some resonance in me the same way it has some resonance in you, despite the fact we don't know each other and we're from different places. And see, the postmodern interpretation would be that the only reason I might find that picture beautiful is because of the culture that I've been brought up in and what's been enforced upon me. There's nothing really in me which makes me find one thing more beautiful than another, apart from what's been conditioned into me by culture. But I really don't think that's right. And I think something's happening now, philosophically, where proper counters are coming to that argument, against that argument now, in the way of I think Jordan Peterson's work. And also, there's something funny. I was going to talk to you, and we'd organized to talk to each other, and then I was you said you were busy and you were traveling, and so then I was just waiting for you to email me back, and then I was watching another YouTube video of yours. You were talking to, what are they called, the Good Old Boys, and I'd never heard of those guys. It was a good interview, and then you started talking about Curtis Yarvin in that interview, and that you liked him, and that you'd read How Dawkins Got Pwned, and that it was a really great way to understand the current moment. It was a really pivotal essay. And I was listening to that on last Thursday, and obviously I was waiting to get a reply back from you from an email, but it was weird because the day before I'd met Curtis Yarvin, just randomly, I just bumped into him at a party, and I was talking to him. And that's when I thought I'd email you again. I sent you that video and things, and I said, I just thought I'd mention it because it was a weird synchronicity. I think that essay, How Dawkins Got Pwned, I think that was the start of a new way of looking at things as well, in that how he explains that the secularism that Dawkins expresses is a bona fide religious framework, but it's just one without a God. And I know lots of people have made that sort of observation that he's still working within a sort of religious framework. But Yarvin really nails it down. He really does a good job of it, like spelling out how there's a specific type of memeplex that is analogous to Christianity, and that you can get rid of God from it. And then it has some aspects which help it transmit better, like how it's cool. Being a Christian isn't cool, but being that sort of atheist and things. But then it smuggles in these ideas of fraternity, and that people should be treated equal, and that you should be
that they
good
are
nice
that we are all equal. We all have this universal human essence to us.
Yeah. And then Yarvin points out that those are not rational claims, that they're not, you have to back those up. Those are faith-based claims unless you can justify them from something else. But it's a good, why is it important? Because it really clearly pointed out that there's no getting away from that sort of religious framework. I think you're sort of built for it, and you have to have a sort of theology. And even if you get rid of God, you have something like I think theology is the right word. That's what
you have moral leverage.
What do you mean by that? Why do you use those words?
So I interviewed a woman earlier this year, and I just published the interview today and yesterday. And she was working with this young girl who was adopted by her grandparents. I don't know. I can't remember what happened to her parents, but was adopted by her grandparents, had some issues, decided to change genders, or the counselors talked her into changing genders. And then because she's getting bullied for being a girl, she turns into a boy and still is bullied for being a girl. Even though she's using the boys' bathroom, the boys are like now have better access to bully her. The girl runs away, hooks up online with somebody who sex traffics her, and then she gets discovered in another state. The state wants to protect her gender identity, and so doesn't let her grandparents interfere, because they don't accept this gender identity that this girl has. This girl's like 13, 14.
Jesus Christ.
Put her into a boys' home. She gets bullied, sexually harassed, runs away again, gets sex trafficked again, ends up in Texas. Texas then gives the girl back to her grandparents, her guardians.
Jesus Christ.
And very important, powerful story about that, just detailing the current state of law, power, and this whole gender thing. But after that conversation, so that conversation, we talk about that story for a couple hours, and then it turns out the woman that I'm speaking to worked for the State Department for several decades. And what she do with the State Department is go to these other countries and say, if you want American money, you need to have American values. And these values were human rights. And so they would use the moral leverage of human rights to affect certain behaviors that probably also have economic, but as well as moral justifications. And then they'd give these other countries money, funding. And it was just really interesting because now the global American empire, or whatever you want to call it, is still doing that with this pride flag, right? So it wants to, I was just talking with somebody about the Ukraine, it's a Russian about the Ukraine. So America is giving Ukraine all this money to fight this war with Russia, basically to decimate its youthful population for some reason. Anyways, there's all this stuff going on with Ukraine and Russia, but America is supporting Ukraine. Ukraine is a very conservative country, but Zelensky, this actor/president, who was playing an actor/president before he became an actor/president. So there's a lot of meta going on in there. He just rams through gay marriage. This country doesn't want anything to do with gay marriage, but America wants it to have gay marriage affected in it. So
was this recently?
Yeah, it was just within the last several months. At least that's what was related to me. But so America has a moral mission in the world. It used to be we're going to give them democracy, but now we're going to give them progressivism in the form of this thing called human rights, which has to do with various different aspects of what it is to be human. And the cool thing about that Yarvin essay is that, well, what is a human? And he really goes through Yarvin and how Dawkins Scott Pone really intentionally says we're not going to use the word human because human we already have an idea of what a human is, and it's not a real term. It's like it's a religious term. So we're going to call them like bipedal hominids or something like that, right? And we're just going to talk about them as though we're talking about a strange entity. And I'm kind of losing my mind.
He does the same thing with the state as well. He won't call it the state, but he'll talk about it as a corporation, a sovereign corporation. And I found that really interesting because he was saying that that's another value that gets smuggled in with that. What's he called? Universalism. He calls it. What Dawkins' religion.
What you were saying about new ways of seeing.
Ways of seeing.
Ways of seeing it. Well, you were talking about how the critical lens got superimposed over our looking or our relationship with art. And before that, you kind of touched upon there was a religious way of looking at art or a pre-critical way of looking at art. That was a shared value. And then you brought in Yarvin as this reemergence. You brought in Peterson and Yarvin about a reemergence of looking at things in a different way. And with Peterson, I see him resurrecting the Jungian lens of archetypes. And archetypes are transcendent values, and you can make kind of scientific claims about them as kind of like somehow burnt into our brains. They're just like, they have a biological basis. I think you can go that route because they keep on popping up in cultures over and over and over again. And that kind of paves the way to this transcendent access to meaning that transcends this one critical lens that is destructive of every narrative that doesn't resolve into the exertion of meaning over somebody else, or the exertion of meaning onto, or projection of meaning onto someone else. Whereas archetypes are a projection of meaning, but also like a releasing of meaning that's already there because our brains are set up to make meaning. I'm wondering how Yarvin, or his deconstructive way of, I guess Yarvin's a part of deconstructing the universalism of critical theory, the universalism of progressivism, and saying this is just another value set, and there are other value sets, but I don't really see Yarvin. I have to make this statement really carefully because I think it's wrong already. I don't see him necessarily advancing a positive vision of the world. I see him critiquing a lot.
That's right. I think the the critique is useful because like I said, he really drove a nail through the fact that Dawkins really wasn't as atheistic as he thought he was, and he wasn't able to get away from certain... You can't develop a software that can get rid of the hardware limitations of being a person. There's things that are built into you. And then I think when you add that with Maps of Meaning by Peterson, you get the idea that I think Peterson does a really good job of drawing a line from the memes of Dawkins, from what's this book called? The
Selfish Gene. Yeah.
Selfish Gene. Yeah. From the Selfish Gene, which is a really solid, scientific work. And then drawing a line from that all the way to Jungian archetypes, which are, have always been considered a sort of woo and a bit strange.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of that you can get something that's genetic and mimetic coevolution, that the stories can get better, and that you respond to the stories, and your life is made better by the story, and your chance of survival is made better by the story.
Oh,
I talked about this before with someone. Imagine if you had different tribes, and they like to sit around a campfire and tell a story at night, and then tribe one just like to sit around, and they didn't like to tell stories. They just like to sit around and be silent. And that gave them a release of dopamine in their head. They really liked sitting around in silence. And so there's a physical thing in their brain which releases the chemical and makes them feel good in silence. And then you have another tribe who the chemical releases because they like to, when they tell a story, but the story is just, I walked around today and it's just about what they saw. Today I walked around, I saw a tree and it was green. And they love that kind of story. There's a little thing in their brain which goes off like that. And then you have a third tribe, and they have this physical adaptation perhaps in their brain where the dopamine is released when they hear a story that's, I went out today and a pig jumped out at me and it had big tusks and it was scary. And then I didn't know what to do. And I picked up a rock and I threw it at the pig and it ran away. And they love a story like that. The third tribe has a massive genetic advantage if they love that story, because they're learning how to deal with this difficult situation, which could save their life without expending any calories. And, that could literally help their genes survive. And then because they've got this, this release in their head when they hear a story like that, they want to hear more stories like that. They get good at telling stories like that. And then so the meme evolves as well to respond to that mechanism. And so the story gets more refined. But then there'll also be something going back the other way, where people who listen to that refined story have a better chance of passing on their genes, especially through sexual selection, which is what Peterson will point out. Like, they'll become more attractive people. If that story gets refined down to, George and the Dragon, this guy going out and, putting on armor and helmeting himself and slaying this dragon, people who really respond to that story and get obsessed with it and then try and live their lives like that, they might become better husbands, better fathers, better at building their house, and they'll become more successful. And so then they have more children, and then their children are also similarly, predisposed. What am I saying?
Predisposed. Yeah.
Disposed, yeah, to that kind of story. And so then you can see, then you get a mimetic and genetic coevolution. And then I think that's right. I think that makes sense. And I think those refined memes will be something like the Jungian archetypes, where they're, I think, quite literally built into you. You are the ancestor of people who found some particular stories more interesting than others over thousands and thousands of generations.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take that as true, which I do, then postmodernism as an art critique, that sort of critical theory, it doesn't make any sense, because it's based on the idea that there's nothing solid to start from. ironically, apart from power, which they somehow think they can smuggle in. But there's no shared experience. We're all just, bubbles in this sea of foam, and we can't really interact with each other. But I should have really, really built into me some response to the story of George and the Dragon as an animal that I won't have to some other story or just some nonsense story. And you should have the same thing. And so then that's all you need. That's solid enough to start building on. And then you can build up a whole language of artistic play. And then the artist should be able to draw on that and draw on symbols like George and the Dragon, then play around with them. But it's definitely solid because it's built into you as a person. And that's what I mean. I think that's how I see it. And I think that argument makes sense. But that's a recent development. Like it's come out of the last, within my lifetime solidly, I think. I think before that, postmodernism really had a grip on art criticism and the way we look at all culture. It really seemed convincing that there was nowhere to get a solid foothold to start from.
Well, postmodernism, just on a intellectual level, doesn't necessarily have to do with reducing things to power. It's just when you advance into the state where everything is relative to everything else, you end up, I guess it's the easiest thing to do is to resolve everything into power relationships, because there's still relationships, even though everything's disparate and disconnected and relative, there's still connection, there's still cohesion that's happening. And so power, I think, is just like what eventually comes to dominate that way of seeing things. And there could have been other ways to go with the postmodern step away from grand narrative into the articulation of many narratives rather than all these different narratives, all these different cultures being in a war and being resolved through some sort of conflict of exertion or power. You could have seen it as family relationships or as different species that just kind of fill in different imaginal niches, and they're related to each other through an environment of through an environmental factor or through affection or through harmony, right? You can use. So maybe I'm not using the word postmodern in the way that it has come to mean, especially in this discourse, but there is a way of stepping past the modern, which is to try to overstand the traditional cultures with a clean, clear, globalist narrative that can somehow dominate all the other narratives, like a supreme airport that connects all the different cultures together, like this thread that runs through everything, or this way of paving roads between all these different smaller cultures, all these different kind of different expressions. When I embarked on a postmodern project in my 20s and finally resolved that project when I turned 40, it was to create a narrative that could unify all other narratives. And not in a totalizing sense, but a narrative that can use other narratives or other forms, a structure that could encapsulate all the kind of forms of story. And how I ended up figuring out how to do that was to take a central character, to take a set of probably 5 or 6 characters and then have them expressed through all these different worlds, like through allegory, through science fiction, through fantasy, through modern life, through horror, through romance, through the epic form and through the biblical forms, through mythology, and then trying to get all these characters to allow them to express themselves in these different ways. To have like this emergent kind of archetypal little girl that just like has an influence over every other world, or this really ambitious man, or this really beautiful woman, or this jester kind of character. And so to get all these different forms to work together rather than to dominate each other. And they're all they're all processing their own narrative. They're all processing their own arc, and they don't necessarily have to bend the knee to any other arc. It was a really ambitious project. I don't know if it came together. I don't know if it's necessarily possible to do something like that, but I know that the thread that I used was not necessarily to dissolve everything into power. And that's what postmodernism did. And that's how it became infected by the conflict theory. I think that Marxism, or that conflict theory, and postmodernism are two different things. Postmodernism is an aesthetic, or an attempt to look at things in relation to other things and to be kind of in between all these different narratives. And Marxism is the impulse to, while you're in between, succumbing to the alienation of being in between, wanting to belong together, and then saying, well, how do we belong together if we're all apart? Well, power is ultimately the only way we can do that. And one final point, if you look at the postmodern narrative, the postmodern plus Marxist narrative, and how it's played out over generations, you see exactly how it affects people and how they behave. Are people who believe in this happy? Are they productive? Are they at peace? Are they making peace? Or are they disgruntled? Are they alienated? Are they degenerate? And are they calling for, let's just say, certain forms of violence in order to create peace? Certain forms of racism in order to create the end of racism, certain sorts of sexism in order to end sexism. And then you'll see the modern college student body and how they behave.
I'm not sure that postmodernism does have a lot going for it, and it had a lot of real true insights, and it produced a lot of good things. But I think it's just, I'm trying to work out why postmodernism led to...
It's hard to be sincere.
Yeah, but don't you think if you're breaking everything down, if Stephen Hicks describes postmodernism as when you're on a train in a station and the other train starts moving and you can't tell if your train is moving or the other train. You know what I mean? It's hard when you've got no external frame of reference, you genuinely can't tell if you're the one that's moving or it's the world that's moving. Yeah. And the fundamental claim of postmodernism is that everything is emotion in regards to everything else. There's nothing fixed to start from. And I think as a philosophy, that's an interesting way of looking at things. And it seems true, and it really seemed true, I think, in the 20th century. But then it sort of leaves it open. At the end, it goes, well, that's it, And I think maybe it's that openness which then it leaves a void, and that void was filled by, by that critical theory, by that Marxist theory, by saying, well, at the end of the day, it's going to be power. Because the story you told, you said that you talked about this airport, this thing that connects all the other stories. But if you're being truly postmodern about it, you'd have to you'd say, well, then why? Why connect the things? What's the purpose of that? You have to keep digging. And eventually you're always going to get to, well, no, I don't know. No reason. It's arbitrary.
Or any reason, I suppose, is my own projection and has to do with my advantage.
But once you reach the end of that story, then some professor can jump in and go, well, I can actually answer why another step. And it's because that's a power game. It's your ego, it's what you want to inflict on this situation. It's power. I think it always leaves it open to that. And I think so. I think it is an inevitability of postmodernism that it leads to that, to critical theory. I don't think you can get another answer from it.
Well, yeah, but I think that you can even accept that answer and then say, okay, so such as if we go back to art, to the painting behind you, which is a descendant from religious ways of knowing.
It's a Rubens.
And there were, you have these cathedrals, these churches with just incredible works of art. And those incredible works of art tie together the highest people in society and the lowest people in society, right? So you have the aristocrats who are in, they engage maybe with it in a certain way, and then the plebs engage with it another way, and then the intellectual class engages in it also. They can see that there's meaning here, whereas the aristocracy and the plebeians maybe not are engaged with meaning, but they're engaged with, maybe community, or maybe social ties, or maybe the pattern of life is just the pattern of life. And this is what we do because this is what we do, which is just like not even curious. It's just like, we do this because we do this. And it feels good to do this, and we come together, we all sing the same song, we all hear the same words, and then we all go out into our different classes of society. So you can go with the critical theory and say, okay, this is all power, and this person, there's this injustice and power, we need to flatten everything, or whatever, I don't know. But in that naive society that doesn't have that critical theory in there, it's just operating because it's operating, and then everybody gets to go out and do the king is the king, the prince is the prince, the baron's the baron, and they are the baron because they are the baron, and the pleb is the pleb because they're the pleb, and there's a certain sort of stuckness to that, and so when we have like the merchant class come in, and then capitalism come in, and then technology come in, and starts to equalize people with regard to I don't know, technology, and wealth doesn't mean as much, and then class or status is there, but it doesn't have the same kind of value to it. And there's no grand narrative that ties everybody together, is that we are a human race, we are a people, and we worship a God together. We are just what we are, and we're a capitalist society. I don't know. So the church would just say, when I talked with Jason Bradley about population control, there are these big organizations, the WF, the UN, they want to save humanity, they want to save the world, or they want to end humanity to save humanity, or whatever they want to do. They have this attitude, they'll go to Africa and they'll save Africans from poverty. They're going to save people from poverty, but they're replacing the Catholic Church that went there and wasn't going to save anybody from poverty. They're going to save people's souls. Poverty was just a state of existence that was just a part of the human condition. We're not going to try to solve the human condition by fixing the external things. We're going to give you food, we're going to clothe you and stuff, but the most important thing is that we're going to save your soul. We're going to orient your values in a certain way. And I guess the WEF, or what, the UN, it wants to kind of do it secularly, but you see that it does have a value. It wants to, educate women and have the women have less babies and give them more, I don't know what values they want to give, but they're doing the same thing that the church did, but they think that they can save the world or solve these world's problems. And every time they try to solve a problem, 10 more problems kind of catch up to them, right? Whereas the Catholic Church, or like this other way of knowing, just allows for these different classes to exist, and don't, wealth in and of itself or poverty and wealth aren't the only vector or the primary vector of value.
Is it genuinely... What do you think? I don't know, because I think I'm pretty cynical. I think I must be misunderstanding why they want to do that. Like, do you think it's genuinely a moral imperative? Like, they really want, like you gave an example of spreading, homosexual equality to different countries and pride flags and things. Do you think that even if that's at a great cost to the organization, and it costs a lot of money, and they really have to push it through, and the people in the country don't want it, they push it through, do you really think they're doing all that work because they really feel that there's just a moral imperative within them? Like, it's just hard for me to imagine that an organization that large would be trying to push morals like that, but it's not. There's not some cynical sort of money or power reason behind it.
I don't see how an organization that large can do anything without a moral compass that ties together everybody's intentions towards the same general direction. Like, I don't see how human beings operate in concert without some sort of moral, or maybe even just imaginative or ambitious kind of spark.
Yeah.
I'm probably just as cynical, but I think that it's not. My cynicism breaks it down to righteousness. The feeling of righteousness is more collectively motivating than just greed. Even though greed will align with righteousness, righteousness will align greeds. Right. I think greed has a less ability to align people than righteousness. And that's why I think that there's a feedback loop. Corporations want to become moral because they know that people, or the organization knows that people need morality. So they create some sort of moral or cultural competency in these different ways, because they know that the people need that unified. So maybe capital or the purely greed aspect of the corporation sees that it's more efficient to have a righteous cause or some sort of morality, even just as a virtue signal, because that's how human beings are. And so the greed enforces the fact that human beings are a certain way, and so it establish itself to fulfill the needs of the humans, because human beings operate more effectively when they are righteous. But I don't think you can take the righteousness out of human beings.
What about that story you told me, that tragedy of the young girl who was moved around state to state, the transgender girl? There was, you said there was institutions who were stopping her seeing her parents and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you think they're acting in that same way? Do you think it's strictly a moral thing? Or do you think that... I think a lot of people in those situations are motivated by fear. Like they're really worried about doing...
which is being on the wrong side of history, right? Which is a form of negative righteousness.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You must talk to a lot of people too who are scared of getting cancelled, and they won't speak out against things that they know are not right.
Yeah,
I think that's a big motivating force within these institutions.
Well, but it is responding to the righteousness or the claims of righteousness of a certain point of view, right? So, and this is the fascinating thing about this concept of the trans kid. Yeah. So there's this idea of the trans kid. It is a very infectious idea that separates people from asking certain questions. What is the evidence of the trans kid? Even the people, the so-called medical professionals like WPATH, these organizations that lay out how to trans a kid, when it comes down to how do you define a trans kid, it's all just like, because the kid says that they're trans. And who told the kids that they're trans? Well, we told the kid that they're trans. So so does the kid know that they're trans? Or are we telling them that they're trans? And then you also have the idea, even if you go into, well, trans is, you can measure transness by, if they have an insistent, consistent, and persistent desire to be the other sex, or consistent, insistent, and persistent dislike of their own sex.
Yeah. And
if you, or gender being how they want to be perceived or how they are perceived, and the difficulties they have with being seen as a woman or being seen as a man, etc. If you look at the children who experience that form of distress, almost all of them, puberty resolves most of that. And then the people who puberty doesn't resolve for it, it takes a little bit longer, but they're usually gay, or there's some other issue in play that is resolved by puberty. But if you have this idea that there's this trans kid and they have to be saved from puberty, you can't start asking the questions, well, it just leads you down this whole other moral framework. And it's really, really powerful, because especially, in my opinion, it's women who are really infected by this idea, because it stirs up something in them to save a child, or to protect this child from what? From puberty. So they'll rally around putting these kids on this thing called puberty blockers. And if you start to ask, well, what do these puberty blockers do? What is the evidence for them? You start to get into these really difficult situations where, well, one, we don't have a lot of evidence, and two, the evidence kind of leads us to believe that this is not a good idea to stop somebody's puberty. Like, we don't have the technology to restart it up. The brain goes through certain developmental phases, and they're hard coded based on time, not based on this thing called gender or sexual development, but just human development. Anyway, so the idea of the trans kid is so powerful that institutions adopt that, or people who are involved in institutions adopt that, and they adopt it with ferocity. And then they create the environment where you can't question a kid's identity. And then you get to a position where you have this girl who's obviously distraught, who's being trafficked around, being treated by an institution as though she was a boy, because the idea that she's a boy overrules the fact that she's a girl. And so it's the proper thing to do. And there's probably ambition at play. Yeah, sure. There's ambition at play. There's probably fear at play in the people who are doing this, fear and ambition, but also a sense of righteousness, a sense of righteous cause. This is the outcome of, like, this is the next, was it Obama or was it Biden that said that trans rights were the defining civil rights battle of this century? I think it was Biden, for whatever that's worth. Right. But like the global American empire has landed after they solved gay rights or gay marriage, has landed on the trans kid now as as an entire institution who's motivated by this thing called civil rights or individual rights or human rights, which is all moral. And it dates back, and it has had certain gains that are incontrovertible. And it also has had bad effects that are incontrovertible, with the communities that it's tried to help. But we have rights, we have equal rights under the law. We have a decrease in institutional racism, certainly. And institutional sexism, certainly.
I think that those values must have risen out of because before I got into thinking about this years ago, I guess I would have thought that religious beliefs and doctrine over the years came from the top down. It was people writing, a book of rules, and then it was integrated into the society. And thou shalt not. But now I think it must be the other way around. That's what I was getting at with Yarvin and Peterson. I think it must be that Peterson idea of mimetic and genetic coevolution sort of making some stories really connect with something inside of you in a very, in a reasonable way. It's that which causes the universalism which Yarvin is writing about. Because the thing you just described with a trans kid, that's a new idea. That's not very old. That's where's that come from? You didn't see it come down from top down. It sort of rose up in the way that you described. You think it responds to something, especially in a woman. You said that it's like trying to save someone. That's a sort of thing that you've got built inside of you, and this is a sort of meme that's parasitic on that and probably other things, and that's why it's able to infect so many people. And as an idea.
It's funny because the trans kid is also one of the ideas of the universalist progressive point of view that explicitly causes them to violate their other value of multiculturalism. Like every culture has to now have trans people in it. Every culture needs to be rescued from homophobia, or the homophobia needs to be purged from every other culture. And so it turns every culture into it's a again moral leverage for the modification of other cultures in the name of something that used to have multiculturalism is in it. It's universalizing. Totalizing authoritarian movement that is nominally against authoritarianism is for like all these rich diversity, says diversity is our strength and stuff, but it erodes diversity while saying that the people who believe in it still believe in diversity too. Right. But the trans kids, no, every culture needs to be trans, and every culture needs to celebrate homosexuality, actually. Or queers for Palestine kind of levels of odyssey.
But that very the very fact that it spreads like that and emerges like that is a sort of proof that there must be some shared, framework that people share, that in order for the ideas to spread like that. You know what I mean? I think that's why I think it seems to be this. It seems that postmodernism is coming to an end at an idea because it's becoming clearer and clearer that there's shared hardware that memes can spread across. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to spread like this. I think it's been said many times that this sort of applied critical theory is like a religion, but it really is a religion, and we're watching now very fast a new religion evolve and create and be created, and that's it's really strange to see. But this must be how all sort of ideology is formed, like what you're describing, and how we've seen it evolve. I guess it was never this fast, but it's fast because of social media and the extent to which we can communicate.
Well, and what's the response to that then? Like, what are these other ideas directing you to do? Positively.
Well,
to believe in positively, to claim, to defend, to assert.
Well, it means we don't need to look at art in the same way that John Berger did. And we don't need to look at culture like that. We can look at things. I'd like to see people getting more out of art and culture than they have been. Because everybody looks at a painting now of, like a knight rescuing a maiden, and they can see it in this terms of patriarchy and sexism and things. But there used to be another way of looking at things before, when we had this shared well of ideas to draw from. And that was something like all of those things can represent you. It could be, you are the knight and you're also the maiden and you're also the dragon. They're all aspects of your psyche. It doesn't need to be about competing power claims. And there's no barrier for you to understand anyone else. There's no, you don't have to, view this work as a woman or as a man or as a certain race. I can understand like a sculpture of the Pieta, like the Madonna and Christ dying in her arms. That's a beautiful image. And on that really superficial postmodern level, you could say that perhaps I can't understand it because I'll never be a mother and I'll never know what it's like to lose a child. I'll never be like that. And so I can never really get it. But it represents that one thing, but it also represents all similar lower things. It represents every time you go out and like if you start a business or something, you create this little thing and it's like equivalent to a little baby. You work on it and you want it to go well. And then you sort of release it out into the world to get crucified and people, criticize it and make fun of it. And you feel the pain of that. And then it fails. And then you are depressed and you're sad and that feeling. It's not the same as losing a child, obviously, but it has it's in a similar sort of pattern. It has a little echo of that archetype. And so then you've never seen your son crucified, but you can go to the Vatican and see the Pieta. And if you've gone through something like that, it can connect with you. It's nothing to do with being a woman or being a mother or anything specific, anything based in identity. There are universal human truths. And as a human, nothing else human is alien to you.
I just want to expand on that. There are universal human truths, but they are also sexed truths. You look at Madonna, there's something inherently meaningful about her being a woman.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, and that relationship is feminine. It's not just universal in this. There is some aspect of identity there or actuality there. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, race isn't as important as sex. Like sex is meaningful. You can't get away from that. There's something about the dying son, the son of God, God the Father. Well, you know, you can decide not to believe in those or have contentious relationships with those concepts, but they're very powerful concepts, and they have a way of speaking to me where, yes, Madonna is Madonna. Madonna is the feminine. The feminine is in me because I am of woman too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Doesn't it speak to the feminine in you?
Yeah. So I just wanted to push that a little bit further to say that the sex, the gender is very operative in our archetypal language. And that's why I say over and over again when I talk to gender critical people that if we destroyed gender tonight, we would have to reinvent it tomorrow because this is how our brains think.
Sure. Yeah. But it would be a very reductive way of looking at art to say that there are whole areas of art that you can't have access to because of your gender, because you can't really understand this as a man or as a woman or as a whatever. I really think I think that there's something to it, and that's why postmodernism really caught on. There is something to it, but it's really not a good lens to look at art and culture. It's just divisive, and it stirs up problems with tribalism based upon identity lines.
So what am I supposed to think about the painting behind you? How do I interpret the painting behind you?
This one, I don't know. I think...
what drove you to paint it?
Well, like I said, it's a Rubens, which is a real classical staple of art, it's a real classic image. It's very traditional and sort of standard and strong and ordered.
So it gives you connection to that, or it allows you to interact with something that's much, much older than you and physically create it, or...
Well, the fact that it's made of plasticine, I think that's the play on it. It's a stupid thing. It's a childish, silly, unstructured, unordered, weak material. And it's silly. And I don't know, a lot of my work is like that. I do a lot of architectural drawing. And I think that's the same sort of thing. Architectural drawings are these plans, and it's straight lines and buildings and angles, and it's very ordered and traditional. And then I'll put in something, subversive or strange or a bit weird.
Why?
And because I think...
Why strange? Why weird? Why subversive?
Because I think art plays on that line between the chaos and the order, I go, there's a great museum in London called the John Soane Museum, and it's just full of architectural drawings from the 1800s. And they're really beautiful, and people like to go there and look at them. But I don't know if they're really art. They're just a little bit too far onto the order side. There's no expression there. They're really beautifully done. They're really beautifully drawn. They're lovely to look at, and they're captivating. There's always a big queue of people to go in and look at all these old drawings. There's something about them. But I don't know if they're really art, because they need just a little push to have something human in there. Because I think that's where all art exists, is in this, is like one foot on the land and one in the sea, It's between things being ordered and chaotic.
Yeah, this openness to it, this question mark to it. You made
and
me think of the Gothic architecture with the gargoyles, like the weird, the strange, the aberration.
Yeah, right.
The vulgar, even.
Yeah. I think it's funny because you've got some idea of the kind of things I think about postmodernism and the current sort of art movement. But I talk to a lot of other artists who feel that kind of way, but they don't like to say it out in public. The art world is really, really soaked in postmodernism. It's super woke, and it really starts to raise eyebrows if you talk out against it. And a lot of people really don't like it behind closed doors. It's the old story. Like you must have talked to people in every industry, but I'm thinking especially of the comedy industry. You saw a few years ago, especially in London. It's a closed world. It's very small. There's a few gatekeepers, and you hear the comedians now saying that everyone sort of thought things were silly and but they couldn't express it. They knew that they would lose jobs and things. And then you got this breakout movement. You started getting things like trigonometry and stuff, and they really exploded because suddenly you had an outlet for all this grumbling. But I think the art world is a lot like that at the moment. There's you'll talk to a lot of people and they think that the way things are done is really silly and is too couched in this postmodern critical theory type way of doing things. But they don't want to say anything about it. They don't want to rock the boat. Well, anyway, a lot of the artists that I talk to that feel that way, it's funny because they're making similar work. Like it's always there's a lot based around old architecture and that same sort of feeling of order and things being sort of strong, things made of stone. I've noticed the same sort of themes in the work, the people that are disgruntled with it. And so I thought that was cool, that I think we're drawn to a similar sort of thing. I think, because you could imagine this Adam and Eve thing behind me. You could imagine if the concept behind it artistically is just that it's a classic Adam and Eve painting, but it's made out of children's plasticine. If that's basically it, you could imagine that done in a much more contemporary way, in a way which would fit in a lot of London galleries more. And that would be to really lean into the plasticine side, to make like little claymation figures, like a little Wallace and Gromit, silly little scene with a tree in the middle and a sort of cartoony snake and the two characters. That's the same piece of art, really, but it leans way more to the chaos side. It leans way more to the silliness, the irreverence, and it's taking only a tiny little bit from the traditional, solid side of things. And I think I intentionally, well, not intentionally, but I find that my work tends to go way more the other way. It still looks like a Rubens, even though it's made of plasticine. When you see it back from afar, it's 90% the Rubens, 10% the plasticine. Whereas the current trend is to go the other way, to go 90% silliness, 90% childishness, and just have a little bit of tradition in it. And I've noticed that same ratio in a lot of other artists that feel the same way behind the scenes. I find that interesting. I think there might be this shift towards anything which is more solid and strong, architectural drawings, a big cube of granite, that kind of thing. And I don't know. That's what I think it's about. You know what I mean? I think it leans on that sort of side. Mm-hmm. It's trying to get you to engage with something old and proper by making it just a little bit more fun. Not much.
What is your trajectory going forward, do you think? From your point of view? Right now?
Sorry?
From where you are right now, how does the future look, especially with your work?
Well, I haven't explained, have I? Like, I'm doing some work with Unheard in London because of what I just explained. Unheard's a really cool place for. There's lots of academics and writers and things who have gone there, and they couldn't. They felt they couldn't write other places, and Unheard's a place where you can hear unheard opinions, and it's really served as a focus point in London for people who felt that kind of way. Like I said about the comedy industry, you get those sorts of guys in there as well. You get the trigonometry guys, and Andrew Doyle has started a Comedy Unleashed comedy night and things. It's sort of a focal point for people that felt that they couldn't express themselves properly in other industry, in other places in their industry. And the art world is very much like that. And I want to do the same sort of thing at Unheard for art. I started talking to them. I recently did a commission for them, which is a big piece they put over the mantelpiece in there. And it was a fun kind of work. It's called The Political Herds, really, and it's a little illustration of all the...
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I can't hear
you. What's it called again? I spoke over you.
Can you hear me?
1 2 1 2.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I got you again.
Hey, there we go.
Sorry, I lost you.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What was it called? What's the painting called again?
I've done a piece called The Political Herds for, and it's a little illustration of sort of the current political moment with every different political group that I could think of, in a big procession.
Really, really, what's the word? Engaging, entertaining. Great to look at too. I'll link it down in the description. Everybody should find the biggest monitor that they can find.
I'm glad you like it. That's nice. Yeah, and it's been really popular there. People like it a lot because they put host events there, and then people have been interested in it. And we're going to sell a series of prints from of the same piece, like pretty soon, I think, like before Christmas. But then we're going to put on a show, a proper show of all my work in the early next year. And then there's other plans in the works to hopefully try and expand it. Hopefully I can put on a show there just like I would do in a gallery. But, that I won't need to compromise on my views or anything. I can talk about what I've talked about with you here tonight. Mm-hmm. And not worry about getting cancelled and not have to watch myself. And if we can put on a show with Unheard and it goes well and, pieces sell, then I'm sure that there'll be other artists who would want to come in and do the same. And hopefully we could do, later on, do another show, bring in some more people, do a little group show.
Yeah. That's the economic and social aspect of where you're going, but creatively. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I want to share with a lot of the creatives at Unheard. I already said I really like Mary Harrington. I haven't met her yet. But I was reading her book and I got an idea for a picture while I was reading it. And I'd like to sort of, not collaborate, but there's something really exciting going on there. There's really interesting people. It's packed full of people, and they're all doing something. There's writers, there's people making things happen. It's an exciting place artistically and creatively. I'd like to try and work with some people in there on new pieces. That's what I go for creatively next. You got to try and surf on that wave of creativity.
Yeah.
Because like I've explained through everything, I think there is a sort of change coming philosophically or happening philosophically. I want to try and document that. And I don't know, because you can't really put too much thought into how your art's going to turn out. You've just got to rely on that little thing in your head that tells you that this is a decent thing to be doing. And I'm just going to hope that it does respond to the other things that are going on around me, that kind of crowd. Yeah, but more drawings. I haven't done any for a while, actually. I've been too busy getting all this stuff ready. I've been really missing it.
Your work is fantastic. I really, really dig it. because
did you have a good look at it?
I'm a sucker for details.
Oh yeah,
and very controlled. Just somebody with the ability to render something with their pencil or their pen or their hand, and then also but then like you said, like there's that thing that breaks you out of just the form. Like there's this dialogue, there's opening this question, this oddity, that makes it like gives me purchase. It starts it enters me into dialogue with the imaginal.
Which ones did you have a look at?
The ones on your website, which I will put on the screen for people, but the video is not going to do them justice. So they're going to definitely have to click the link.
Was there anything you particularly liked there?
Well, I really, really like the procession, the herd. One. I don't have the link on me right now. I'd have to open it up on my phone and then send it to my computer. But I'd have to look at it to talk about it. Maybe I could do that.
Well, that's perfect for you, that one, isn't it?
JG Fox,
you've talked to most of those groups. Yeah, jgfox.art.
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 There we go.
Or you can look on my Instagram as well. I'm jgfoxart on Instagram. My stuff's there.
So is this... I think, did you actually weave this thing? You have woven tapestry, or is it a drawing of a woven tapestry?
No, those tapestries are woven, but I didn't weave them. I designed them, and I sent them off to be made.
Oh, how did you design them? This is amazing. Like through computer, I guess?
Yeah.
You draw it, and then you have the computer do some sort of bit mapping to it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
With
a lot of my stuff, I like from afar them to look like something old.
Classic, yeah.
And then when I imagine I'm decorating an old manor house in my mind a lot of the time. And I imagine what I'd see there.
Where cocaine comes
the tapestries fit in. Yeah, the cocaine one, that was based on there's a really classic illustrator in London called MacDonald Gill. And he used to do hand-drawn maps, like maybe the 20s, 30s.
Oh, this is so gorgeous.
And he did a map of the British Empire called Where Our Tea Comes From. It was just parts of India and things. And and it was a beautiful hand-drawn map in that style. And so I thought I'd do a modern version, and it's Where Our Cocaine Comes From. And it's done in the same sort of style. But again, it's like awakening that old piece. Because if you saw that old 1920s, 1930s piece now, it wouldn't have the same sort of pizzazz that it had when it was originally made. It would have been genuinely interesting to see where our tea comes from back then. But that's not as cool to us now. So I think by adding in something a little subversive, it wakes it up again. You might feel like someone felt when looking at the original, like how interesting that was.
I'm looking at your Rubens now, and like on my nice big screen. Oh, it's so gorgeous. I just really enjoy your work. That's why.
Thank you very much. That's really nice.
That's why you want a spot on the Benjamin Boyce show.
I've lost you again. I hope you're paying me a compliment because I am.
Yeah, no, you don't deserve compliments. Bad for your ego, but you did get one. I highly recommend people check out your website, and they can get printed. They can get printed versions of your work, and let's plug that now. Where can they find you? And links will be in the description. But
at the moment, we're waiting on Unheard to sort it out. You have to just everything will be for sale through Unheard soon. We're putting a show together and everything. I've got a book. You can buy my book on Amazon. It's called The Art of J.G. Fox.
That's great.
And Unheard will be selling prints of the political landscape or the political herds in the next few weeks, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to try and push those out before Christmas.
Oh, great. Yeah.
All right.
Maybe I'll have something.
You're going to get one.
Here then. Yeah,
that'd look really cool. All right, I'll sort you out, and then in the new year they'll be selling everything else. So if you're interested in my work, just follow me on Instagram and things. I'm quite new to social media. I was avoiding it for a long time, so I've only just sort of started out on there. So I would appreciate if people could add me because it would be cool because I can probably actually talk to people because I don't have too much going on there yet. So if you've listened to this, then you've got to add me and just,
you have to
say hi.
You're obligated.
All right.
Mr. Fox, thank you very much for reaching out to me.
Thank you very much. It's really nice.
This dialogue, this back and forth on these ideas. And people definitely.
I'll get in touch about a picture.
Yeah, get in touch about a picture, and hopefully I'll make it my way to London one day, and I can check out your this wonderful.
Well, yeah, let me know when you're in London.
Call
yeah, we can go to Unheard.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Cool. All right, it's been really nice to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.